Hello everyone, this week's grammar lesson will cover comma rules 6 through 9, but first, let's briefly review the first 5 rules we covered last week. Rule 1 states that a comma must be used before a coordinating conjunction, that is fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so, that joins together two clauses to create a compound or compound complex sentence. Rule 2 uses a comma to set off introductory words, phrases, and clauses. This could be dependent clauses, prepositional phrases, transition words, so on. Rule 3 requires commas to separate items in a series of 3 or more. Remember that we use the Oxford comma in this class to avoid confusion. Rule 4 uses commas to set off non-essential or extra information that will not affect understanding of the sentence if it's removed, but may provide extra context. And Rule 5 uses commas to set off parenthetical information. This includes things like asides that you might say underneath your breath. And that brings us to Rule 6. Rule 6 requires the use of commas to set off transitional elements. Looking at the first sample sentence, this may seem very similar to Rule 2. That's because it is. However, transitions don't necessarily have to come at the beginning of a sentence. Wherever they jump in to interrupt the flow of the sentence, they should be surrounded by commas, like in the examples here using however and in fact. Rule 7 pertains to dialogue and quotations. When you see dialogue included in an article or in a book, you'll notice that there is often a tag that lets the reader know who is speaking. This tag is usually separated from the quotation with a comma. Additionally, if the tag comes at the end, there will be a comma at the end of the quotation before the tag. If it interrupts the quotation, comes in the middle, there will be commas both before and after it. Notice that if there is a comma at the end of a quotation, it gets pulled inside the quotation marks. The same is true of periods too. Rule 8 covers several situations. The first is when a person is directly addressed in a sentence. For example, if you were trying to speak to your professor about your views of AI, you might say something like the first example to get their attention. As with some of the other rules, if this address happened in the middle of the sentence, you would put commas both before and after it. For example, my views of AI, comma, professor, comma, have remained the same. If you're answering a yes or no question and explaining the response, you'll use a comma to set off the yes or no. This also holds true for words like of course, which is a stand-in for yes. Interjections or exclamations, words that help convey emotion, are also set off from the sentence with commas. And finally, tag questions. Questions that follow a statement and usually ask for confirmation of the statement are separated by commas. Finally, commas are also used between street addresses, city names, and state names. They're also used to separate the day from the year in dates to avoid confusion. If the address or date falls in the middle of the sentence, the last elements of the address or date will be followed by a comma. Take a moment and pause the video. Add the commas to the sentence where they are needed and identify which rule or rules require their use. In the first example, we have an address, so this is Rule 9. In the second example, for example, is a transition phrase, so it's Rule 6. In the third, holy crap is an interjection showing surprise, so it's Rule 8. In the fourth, there's a quotation with a speaker tag, so Rule 7 requires it to be separated with a comma. The fifth sentence includes a statement followed by an attached tag question, that's Rule 8, which requires a comma to separate them. The sixth is Rule 9 for dates, and the final sentence requires multiple commas. The first commas set off John, and therefore direct address. Commas around California follow the rule for place names. The comma after proclaimed is setting off the direct quotation from the really long speaker tag, that's that whole beginning of the sentence. And the comma after clothes is separating the tag question, didn't you? Take a moment to see if you can determine where to add the commas in this paragraph. Pause the video. Here are the answers. How did you do? Which ones did you miss? Look back over the comma rules and see which rules you're having difficulty identifying. I know that we went through commas really quickly, so if you have any questions or would like to set up a Zoom conference, contact me at mohondoylek@apsu.edu.